Good morning, everybody, and happy Wednesday. Thanks for coming back for another day of your lunch break. My name is Ivana, if you are new here, and you might recognize my guest today. If you do not recognize him, this is State Superintendent of Education, Dr. Eric Mackey. And Dr. Mackey has been a very busy man lately. As we know, schools across Alabama are reopening and have been for the past week or so. I believe as of tomorrow, the majority of schools in the state will be open in some form or fashion, either in person or virtually. So we've got Dr. Mackey here to answer a few questions for us. If you have any questions, please let me know. I will be watching them come in, and I will ask him those questions as we have time. So I don't want to waste any more time. Dr. Mackey, thanks so much for coming here, taking a few minutes to tell us about reopening schools. I know that's something a lot of us are dealing with right now in some way.
Absolutely. Glad to be a part of it today. And yeah, we're doing that in my own life too. So I have a son starting tomorrow to school. So we're doing some back to school shopping, last minute stuff tonight, trying to get ready. It's going to be an interesting school year.
Oh, I know y'all procrastinated that list, I can tell. But
Yeah, we did.
Let me ask you, I know that as most of these schools start reopening, there has to be things that you have seen that either maybe are better than you imagine them to be or even worse. So how has this reopening and the things that have happened since reopening in those schools that have already started, what have you seen that has either met your expectations or defied your expectations?
Yeah. So let me talk about that in kind of two sections. So first of all, I'm going to talk about schools that are in-person open. And then I'll say a little bit about the virtual too, because we have both of those things going on now. So we have tens of thousands of students that are doing remote learning through a virtual or online capacity. And then we have tens of thousands of students who are in person in school. It's been interesting the first couple of weeks to kind of compare those two and to see how things are going. So the in-person, it actually has gone really well as far as we've had very few cases. Now, we have had cases, but again, as I mentioned, we've had tens of thousands of students in school. We've had about 20 positive cases of COVID-19 in the schools. Those have led to now a series of hundreds of kids having to be sent home because of the social distancing and the contact tracing that's laid out by public health and CDC. So that's been the most difficult part, is the contact tracing. The good news is that we've really not had that many positive cases. And so what we found is, because this gets to the heart of your question, what have we found that works right is to identify those cases quickly. So if we can identify a student who feels ill, is running fever, has multiple symptoms. Now, originally, first couple of days of school, I think some kids might have gotten sent home because they had a runny nose and no other symptoms. And public health has clarified we're talking about multiple symptoms. Unless it's a very serious symptom like loss of taste or smell, which is pretty closely associated with COVID. But if we can identify students pretty early, get them to their pediatrician or healthcare provider to be tested or assessed to see what's going on with them, and then get them out of the system before they possibly infect other people. So that's happened in multiple cases, and we ended up with maybe only 2 or 3 other children getting sent home. But we've had some places where it did not happen quickly enough, no fault of anybody. We're learning our way through this. And then we might have 15 or 20 students sent home because of one positive case. So the faster we can identify a problem as far as a symptomatic child and get that child away from the other folks, the better off we are. Let's say this quickly about the virtual learning. It's actually gone pretty well in most places. The biggest issue that we have is lack of devices. So as you may know, many of these devices are produced in Asia. There has, and particularly in China, and there's a back order. Their devices are not available. We have school systems that have literally tens of thousands of devices that they ordered in the summer, and they're on back order. And so they're trying to figure out, well, which students have a device that maybe they can use their own, and then how we provide devices for the other children. So it would be good if everybody had a school issued device, but in some cases that's just not been possible.
When you talk about that shortage of devices, is there any program that is being developed for people to be able to donate maybe devices to these schools, or do they have to be new issued devices to give to these students?
No, that's a very good question. We do not have a statewide program for that, but absolutely, I think that you could, if you've got a device, possibly you could donate to a local school. Then I would call the school and talk to them. There are some real serious considerations in there. Obviously, devices we have in the school system, they have to be completely wiped. So you couldn't loan a device out. I mean, it's got to be a clean new device. Has to meet certain minimum security protocols because there are just some things we absolutely have to have as we're providing internet service. But I would say, even though that's a good possibility, Ivana, that what we really would need is for those folks maybe to reach out to people in their neighborhood or their church or around and see, hey, is there a family that needs an extra device? And let me just give you a quick example. So we've polled across the state, and most families have some sort of device. Not all families now, but most families have access to some sort of device. But we've found that there are many families, and I'm not just talking about children in poverty. It includes children in poverty, but but middle class families where they have a family computer they all share. They may have 3 children in school, so they really need 3 devices. You've got 3 children sharing one family computer. And mom may be also using that computer for a home business or something. So there are definitely folks out there that if you've got an extra device that you can loan out for a time, they need those.
That's a good point to make. I'm glad you made it. You talk about devices, and that brings us to what you need to have those devices work, and that is internet. We know that there are plenty of people across the state, A, that do not have broadband access, or B, may be in an area with access but can't afford to pay for internet services. So I know there's been some news coming out of Montgomery about some internet vouchers. Can you tell us a little bit about those vouchers and who qualifies for those?
Yeah, so it's called the ABC for Students program, and there's actually a website, abcforstudents.org, and that's run through the ADECA, the Alabama Department of Economic and Community Affairs. Essentially, the governor gave $100 million of her coronavirus relief funds that came from Congress to ADECA to administer grants in the form of internet vouchers. And I'm going to give a very, very short and simple explanation, but students that qualify for free or reduced price lunches, they're going to get a letter in the mail like soon. The first letters will begin arriving on next Monday, and it should be addressed. Make sure, but I haven't seen one yet. But it's supposed to be addressed to the parents of. So my child's name is Tommy. Then it'd be to the parents of Tommy Mackey. And when you see that letter, don't throw it away. I know you get a lot of solicitations, but we need people to open the letter. Inside, it's going to say, you've been identified to possibly qualify for one of these internet vouchers. And some people may get a letter, but they don't really qualify because they may be on the list from last year. Maybe they've changed jobs. They don't qualify anymore. So there's a little stipulation on that. But most people who get a letter will automatically qualify. There's going to be a voucher number in there. You can actually go to the website. You're going to find out who provides internet in your community that's participating. And you can contact that provider. It might be Charter Spectrum, because I know they're participating. And so you call them and say, hey, I've got this internet voucher. You give them the voucher number. They're going to come to your house, connect internet within a couple of days, and then turn it on, and you're going to have the internet. Now, that's the way it should work, and we believe that will work for the majority of people that way. There are going to be glitches. For instance, let's say somebody's moved to Alabama from Mississippi over the summer. They qualify for free and reduced price lunches, but they're not on the list yet because we're using obviously the list from last May because we don't have a new list yet. So there's a website and a phone number that they can go to for direction. If they go to the school and they fill out the paperwork for free lunch, then when the next round of lists are run, the state will run that list again in a couple of weeks, and their name will show up that time. So for some people, it's going to take a little bit of time to get through the process. For people who qualified last year and they still qualify this year, and if they're still at the same address, if they meet those 3 things, it should be seamless and quick. But we know that won't be true for everybody.
Is there enough of those vouchers to help everybody in the state who has kids or students that need to get the internet to be able to learn?
Yes, so there's actually should be plenty of money because again, there's $100 million. The program runs out in December, unfortunately, because the congressional funds end in December. So essentially, we're talking about we think it's going to be about 250,000 households, and that should be enough to pay for the connection fees and the service for all 4 months, and probably a little more. Some of these companies have been just extremely gracious in offering programs for like $10 and $20 a month for what people might otherwise pay $60 or $70 a month for, because they understand we've got to get service to children.
Good question here. And I'm not sure if you can answer it, but I know that you can give the resources to where this could be answered. This was from, if I can find it now, but I cannot find your name. Carrie, she says, what if people have the internet, but maybe their speed or how many gigabytes they're receiving from their company is not enough to run these programs like Schoolology or other things that classrooms are using? Will these vouchers allow them to bump up that speed?
It will actually. So that's one of the things we put in there a minimum stipulation that it had to be fast enough speed to run the programs, the video programs and all that need to be done for school. So if you've got slow internet and you want to bump up, you can either, if your current provider's on the list, contact them, or a different provider and say, I want that for my child. Again, the only issue is going to be that the federal money runs out in December. Now, we're already talking with school systems about how we can use some other funds to expand this through the spring, but it is possible that you would get it, you get that higher speed through December, and then you'd have to renegotiate with your company, cable company or provider in December for the spring. But hopefully we'll have some extension through the spring.
We have one of our reporters who actually wrote a story about that has dropped the link to that story in this comment thread that has all the information you should need for that. And Dr. Mackey, can you give that website one more time for people who need information?
It's ABC, so abcforstudents.org.
Easy enough, abcforstudents.org. Now, Dr. Mackey, let's shift into talking about things that are happening inside the classroom. I know that there's a lot of technical questions. Like I know one from Dolly asked, how many feet are supposed to be placed or are being placed between desks in classrooms?
Okay, so this is a little bit of a confusing answer. The contact tracing is 6 feet, 15 minutes. And so ideally, we would like to see desks placed 6 feet apart. And the reason you want desks 6 feet apart is because if you can verify that, hey, Eric got he has a positive COVID test, but all the other desks in the classroom are at least 6 feet away from him, then nobody else in the classroom may not have to go home for quarantine. Now, they might still, because they might be on the football team together and there might be other issues, but they should not be, exposed in the classroom for more than 15 minutes if the desks are that far apart. We know that in many places that is not possible. So the desks might be 3 feet apart or 4 feet apart or 5 feet apart, and that's perfectly fine. There's no rule that says the desks have to be 6 feet apart. It's just if they can maintain the 6 feet, then it helps with contact tracing later. Another issue, though, we need to be careful about on this is that desk beyond the other desk. So let's say if I can only get my desk 4 feet apart in the room, and student A does have a COVID positive test, then I have to look at my seating chart, and when student B and D may also have to go home then on quarantine because they've been seated closer than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. But then student E is on the other side of that desk. That child does not have to go home because they've not been 615 for student A that got the virus. That's complicated. We have to keep going through that, but that's why we keep talking about 6 feet, because if you can keep all the desks 6 feet apart in every direction, then we don't have to fool with that at all. And that's kind of the gold standard we're after.
Now, you talk about this contact tracing of if student A gets COVID and student B is maybe 3 feet away, then student B needs to quarantine. Who is in charge of making sure that the contact tracing is happening in the classroom? Is it the teacher's responsibility?
It should not be the teacher's responsibility. I'm going to say something, and I'm going to give a little detail. It's really our collective responsibility. So ultimately, that contact tracing responsibility falls to the Alabama Department of Public Health. The problem is student A gets a positive COVID test today, and public health, they're behind. They're focusing on two groups, nursing homes and schools. So they're going to try to contact that family. But it may be a couple of days before they get to the family, and by then the virus may have spread. So what we've decided is that we need the school nurse or a school administrator to go in and very quickly say, okay, student A has a positive diagnosis, or has enough symptoms that medically it's kind of probable that he or she may be positive. And so then we're going to have to look at the seating chart and look at that room and say, students B and C and D they need to go home to quarantine for a period of time. So we're asking schools to do that. And I say we, the Alabama Department of Public Health is asking them to do that. And we're kind of the conduit because the schools recognize us more than they do public health. And we're glad to be the conduit there. But public health has to make the rules. We're not medical professionals over here. And then we are just relaying that information. So public health is asking schools to take on that responsibility, not teachers really. The teacher's job is just to kind of know where that seating chart is, to take the responsibility to make sure that students are sitting in the desk where they're assigned so the seating chart's correct and that kind of thing. We're asking school nurses to do that. As we all know, there are some schools that share nurses. If the nurse is out, or God forbid, if the nurse gets sick and is not there, then somebody else that has to take on that responsibility. So it might be a school counselor or a social worker or an assistant principal, or it could be a teacher, a lead teacher who says, I'll take responsibility for everybody, for seeing that's done on my hallway. A lot of people are having to step up and do things they've never done before.
Do you feel confident that even though there's not one assigned person to have that job, it's like you said, it's collective responsibility. There's several people who are supposed to be keeping an eye out, but no one person is technically assigned that job and is paid to do that job. Do you worry that there could be too many cooks in the kitchen and then the pot gets dropped because nobody has their hands out?
Yeah, and that has happened to some degree a little bit. So every school system does have a lead nurse, and the legislature provides for that. So there's at least one nurse in every school system, and we continue to do trainings with those people and to try to make sure that the lead nurse is really the person taking on that responsibility. But unfortunately, in some school districts, that lead nurse may have lots of nurses to help her or him, but in some school districts, they may not have other people to help. So and they have other duties also, so it could fall behind. One of the issues that we see is that we're trying to all work through the interpretation of the rules. Let me give a quick example. We all watch baseball and football and volleyball and those kind of things. And I'm going to use volleyball for this quick example. So if you've ever been to a volleyball tournament, you have multiple times seen the line ref say that ball's out. And then the other people jump up and yell and say, it was in. And there's this argument about, was it in or was it out? Well, the ball was either in or out, but multiple people saw it from multiple angles and they interpreted it differently. And that's kind of what we're seeing in the classroom, is that some people are being extremely cautious and they're like, well, I know Johnny was around Susie, but I'm not really sure if it was 15 minutes or it was 20 minutes or it was 12 minutes. And so I'm going to be really cautious and say Susie has to also go home. And then you got other people that are saying, I'm not sure, but I don't think Susie, I don't think she was that exposed to Johnny that much. And I know both of them were wearing their mask. So I'm going to say Susie doesn't have to go home. And it really comes down to professional judgment. And I know some people are out there have gotten upset about that because they're like, there's got to be one set of rules. Well, folks, it's like volleyball. There is one set of rules. The ball is either in or out, but different people from different angles see it different ways. And so teachers and school nurses and school administrators are having to learn okay, this is what the rule says, 615. But in every situation, I have to learn to how to interpret that rule for the best interest of the health of our students.
That's an interesting analogy. Got a shifting a little bit, but this is an awesome question from Brittany. I'm going to put it on the screen. She says, "What is being done to help students with the social and emotional aspect of what they're dealing with at school, such as teachers in math not being able to socialize?" And I mean, that's something that all of us are seeing outside of schools, just in the real world, but that kids are really experiencing on that day-to-day basis such a shift in what they're used to.
Yeah, it's tough. And there are a few things that we are doing from the department level. There are some more things that are going on in certain school systems. So I'll give you a couple of examples. This year we already were working with the state legislature to put in place a school social worker, mental health coordinator program. And so we have awarded 100 grants to local school systems to hire a mental health coordinator, which is it could be a school social worker, it could be a mental health counselor. And this is a person not necessarily there to do counseling. They may be qualified to do counseling, but it's to identify supports for students and to connect them to whoever they need to see. So in some cases, they're going to need to see a therapist. And that really is where we originally were pushing, is to help teachers identify which students need a therapist, and then to work with the Department of Mental Health to see to it that they had access to a therapist. But now what we're seeing is more of what you just talked about. It's really not students that necessarily need therapy, but their mental health. They are struggling with their mental health because of the stress at school, the stress at home, because things are not normal. And so we are looking at how we can use those coordinators to do some in-class lessons, some daily assessments to try to help just bolster mental health in students that are kind of in that low needs ground. They don't need therapy necessarily, but they do need support. Unfortunately, that takes time to roll out. These grants became available. We've made the grants available. They're interviewing people now. The money's not available until October 1st. And so we'll be well into the school year, which, that's the way budgets work. The money is appropriated in the spring for the year that starts October 1. So it's not available really to go ahead and get started. So I do believe you'll see some really strong supports by Christmas time in the schools. But right now, and we're counting on teachers to help us identify those students that need it. And look, our teachers need the help too. Our teachers are also really struggling with a very different way of teaching and not being able to go up and hug that student that needs a hug. I know some of them are doing it anyway, and I don't begrudge them. I'm really, a teacher knows that the student needs a hug. They're going to take care of that student first. And we're hoping they'll stay with them for 15 minutes within 6 feet. But we're also not telling them to treat students like they're in an ICU ward or something. They've got to create as much normalcy as possible.
We are asking our teachers to do a lot, and I think that we all are grateful and should be more grateful because our good teachers are worth their weight in gold. Question from many people about why have you not ordered schools to stay closed? Why have you ordered them to open? And if at what point would you order those schools to be closed?
Yeah, good. Those are good questions, and they're kind of confusing. So let me lay out that legally, the only folks who can close schools are local school boards, and the state health officer can close schools during this pandemic because of the state of emergency. I don't have the authority to close schools or to open schools or even to set the opening day of school. Now, I have encouraged schools, I think that's widely known, I've encouraged schools not to open before August 20th. I mean, we're not even to August 20th yet, and there are tens of thousands of students in school. So obviously, I don't have the authority to enforce that, and that's okay. I just, but I made that recommendation because we knew that there was a lot that was going to be need to be done to get ready for school. Many schools started much earlier, started as early as August 3rd and 4th, but our recommendation was August 20th. As we work with the Department of Public Health, they are monitoring the schools that are open. And we've seen some school boards that have closed down for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days already. And public health is working with them. So what we've encouraged is local school boards to not make that decision in a vacuum, to either consult with public health directly or to contact our office, and we'll make the connection with them in public health to make those decisions. But there's not a hard and fast number. I want to contrast that question with the flu. So flu season, every year we have schools that close. Again, we don't close those schools, don't have the legal authority to close those schools. School boards close their schools. But superintendents call us and they say, what do you think? Help us work through this. Generally, we look at about 20%. If about 20% of your students and faculty and staff are affected by the flu, then it probably is time to shut down for 2 or 3 days. Do a real thorough cleaning of the school, let folks go home, encourage them not to be out at the park or going to ball games. You need to just shut down and go home for a few days and let that curve begin to go back down. And it works. COVID is different than the flu. If we waited until we had 20% positive cases in a school, I think that the community would probably be falling apart before you got to that, because the positivity rate is it's not 20% in most communities. It's well below that already. So what we're looking at is if 20% of your students are gone, though. So you may have, again, only 2% positive, but if through contact tracing it leads to more and more students being gone, probably about 20% is the number at which you can't function anymore. If 20% of your people are out, it's hard to keep going. But we may have schools that close at 12% or at 8% also, because it depends on who those folks are that have to be out of the school. So we continue to work through those things. I know that's a struggle. I get emails every day from people who want us to close all the schools. Again, I don't have the legal authority to do that. And I get emails also every day from people who want me to do away with all the contact tracing and all the social distancing rules, and nobody's wearing a mask, and we're going to do everything the way we were doing it last year and pretend there's not a disease out there. So I get emails from both of those folks, and what we're trying to do is find the safest path for students. We want students to be safe and healthy and to learn. And so I can't pay attention to what's happening on either one of those fringes. Not that I don't respond to them. I do respond as quickly as I can.
I think you and I both need some email help. It sounds like we're getting similar emails. So, Dr. Mackey, I think unfortunately we are out of time, but we appreciate you so much coming and giving us a little bit of clarity on several of these very important topics. And we are wishing everybody that is sending kids back to school the best of luck, no matter which route you are choosing. And that goes to you, Dr. Mackey, as well.
Yeah.
Best of luck with your son.
I hope that you guys left some markers and paper, because we're going to need some. Thanks.
Sounds like you are in for a late night Walmart trip. So may the force be with you on that one. And thank you so much, Dr. Mackey. Thank all of you for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
Okay, thanks.